One of the things we started to see, Dr. Anna Marie and I, as we worked year after year, is many people came to us that we were absolutely, positively sure contracted disease from clothing that they were wearing. And only one book ever did I find that addressed this issue. One book that was in and out of print so quick 30, 40 years ago, nobody read it. And I started to then collect, as I did with other subjects that I've written on, science, data, information, and personal experience working with people. And by doing that, it became very clear that we had other lonely voices in the world that were doing magnificent work to expose how dangerous particular clothing was and how it directly related to cancer, mental illness, neurological problems, etc. It also opens up a whole new door to the world of garment manufacturing. We're in the communities that literally have slave labor, so you can buy inexpensive jeans at the Gap. In these factories, they actually work them until they die from disease. And they're all so poor, they literally bring their kids in after they're dead so that you can buy inexpensive jeans. Any of you that shop at the ungodly, un-American stores like Walmart, they deserve a lot worse. Don't walk into that non-American store. That's an anti-American store. And bottom line is, when you start to look at all of this, you say, wow, something else I have to concern myself with. And you better. Now let's just review some of the things here as rapidly as we can. Why the emperor wears no clothes. When you start to look at all of this, when we start to see what clothing really is, it's amazing. Ornamenting the human body, whether with paint or tattoos or clothing, seems to have always been our natural impulse, but was a secondary consideration to confront and protection from the elements. We really were so strong years ago that we'd be in a place like New York in our indigenous state, probably without clothing on at this time of the year. You and I run outside when it's 30 degrees and we completely freak out and want to go back into our 75-degree homes. And so part of this became cultural indoctrination, and as we became so-called civil, do you understand what the word civil means? Uncouth, I really think, but civil actually means we conform. We fit into the civility of a particular cultural indoctrination. Some of the earliest sewing needles made from ivory and bone have been carbon dated to about 30,000 years ago. So we started about that point, obviously, in small groups or tribes of people to adorn our body as we became silly and went further and further north. Now, the natural state of affairs for humanity at the beginning, we were nomads that moved from place to place. We would certainly not be in Long Island, New York, or whatever this would have been called thousands of years ago at this time of the year, and we certainly wouldn't be in Florida in August. We would probably be in northern Canada. And so people really didn't need to worry about clothing until we started to settle, and they were certainly not what we'd call civil at that point, but they started to settle, and that we're going to address tonight and tomorrow, about how we've gotten into the mess we are so you know how to get out of this mess. The Industrial Revolution mechanized the textile industry so that the mass production of clothing became both possible and profitable. Cotton, flax, wool, and silk remained the mainstays until the petrochemical revolution of the 20th century, which brought synthetic fibers made in chemical laboratories. So after the Second World War, the oil industry, the petrochemical industry, started to realize they weren't making the same amount of money because people weren't killing one another in a war condition. So they had to invent new ways, new outlets of revenue. And one of the many devious and insane things they did is say, let's start to create plastic clothing. And you know that as polyester, nylon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That studies that were done show that you could wash a garment 1,000 times. It could be a decade old, 10 years old, and it still emits about 96 to 97% of the same gastric fumes it did the day it was manufactured. Now, those gastric fumes just don't evaporate and disappear into the atmosphere. They go into something called the human pores on the skin, the largest organ of the body. And if you look at studies after study, they show that that is indicative of disease. 1924, rayon was created, nylon 39, acrylic 50, polyester 53. We said after the 70s we'll never wear polyester again. So for the youth here, they changed the name for you. It's called microfiber now. That's what polyester is. Same show, just like with drugs. Once they realize a drug is harming you, they don't get rid of it most of the time. They change the name of it most of the time. Spandex, how do you like that one? That's so you look sexy with those yoga uniforms on. So you go to do yoga to become healthy, and you're putting what into your body? Chemicals. Much clothing is manufactured from synthetic chemicals. Even the fiber used for natural fiber clothing is typically grown with synthetic chemicals, unless it is organic. Many of these chemicals are toxic to human bodies. We actually estimate that 25% of all the pesticides on the planet Earth is used for the cultivation of cotton. I'll repeat so I just said. So even myself, who I don't always find organic cotton shirts, everything's natural, all the suits, all of the clothes I wear, but the fact is, it was most likely, with this shirt, by the way, grown with chemicals. And so there's things that we'll talk about later if you have questions on that, how to resolve that. As a further challenge to health and safety, most of the cleaning agents used to wash or dry clean clothes contain chemicals that can trigger adverse physical symptoms. Near Jandy's health store here on Long Island, one of my great alumnus friends who healed herself of a catastrophic disease had a son that was so excited that he literally became enthralled with the idea he wanted to have a dry cleaning service. He wanted to make a living. And he collected pennies for years and finally got the dry cleaning service, and he went in. The city came in and said, you're going to have to clean up all the noxious, toxic waste that's here. And he said, well, I just bought the business. And they said, well, this is part of the stipulation. Even if you bought it today, you've got to clean it up, because they explained to him this is the most dangerous cancer-causing chemical known to man that we use in dry cleaning. Now, here in the New York City area, you start to notice all of them are, quote, organic cleaners made with soy. But when I approach people who are not, I say, why don't you now go organic? They tell me that the cost to transfer a shop like that to an organic cleaning is prohibitive in most cases. But why don't they make laws? And why don't they subsidize the oil industry? Why can't they subsidize that when we know, governments know worldwide, the most carcinogenic, cancer-causing chemical in history is dry cleaning fluid? And it doesn't go away, by the way. What we dump today, your great-great-great-great-grandchildren are going to be enduring. Consider the babies and young children often place clothing in their mouths and then chew and suck on the fabric. This is very dangerous since the natural detoxification system of children's bodies aren't fully developed. As estimated, 8,000 chemicals have been employed to transform raw materials into clothes, according to The Ecologist magazine. Now think of what I've just written and articulated there. Just to manufacture clothing alone, they have 8,000 varieties of chemicals, all dangerous for you, that they employ in this. And maybe this is why they work people until they die and then bring their offspring in to work in these garment factories in Indonesia, China, etc., etc., etc. But you're happy, you look good. Don't worry about it. You look good in the process. Synthetic clothing now commonly contains such toxins as formaldehyde, formaldehyde flame retardants, and perfluorinated chemicals like Teflon fibers to give trousers, skirts, and other apparel non-iron and non-wrinkle durability. This I didn't even know until I investigated to write this book. My colleague, research assistant, lives out on the West Coast. He said to me, you know, we can't finish this book. I said, why? I said, I've finished it. I'm sending you the... He said, no. He said, send me to Berkeley. They're having an international conference against formaldehyde and fire retardants on clothing. And I said, formaldehyde? Now here I was writing the book on clothing. I didn't know this. He came back on Monday. He said, okay, big shot. He said, go into your wardrobe and see all your 100% cotton shirts and see how many say no ironing on it. And I pulled out 4, 2 of which happened to be my favorite shirts. He said, now bring them in the backyard, put a mask on and burn them. He said, because they have formaldehyde on them. Now how many of you knew that until I just said it? I didn't know this several years ago. And what do you think formaldehyde does? If I want to save a body, preserve a body, what do I put it in? This is deadly stuff. It kills brain cells. Any of you ever open up a jar with a frog in it and take a good inhale of formaldehyde? How do you feel at that point? Forget it. Let's move on to the next one. Health impacts are accumulating. Synthetic clothing became mainstay in the 1960s, which means its chemicals have been in contact with human skin for just half a century. In those same 50 years, according to the World Health Organization, the industrialized parts of the world have experienced the following. Up to 1/3 of married couples today experience fertility problems. Now, one of the things you girls got boys to do, because we wanted, to always keep you down until the 60s. And then women said, wait a minute, we're going to talk back. We're not going to let you keep us down anymore. So you got us by the 70s, you got us to wear panties. A man would never have worn panties in the 60s and before that. What the hell is this stuff? These panty-looking, colorful things you stuck on us. So you guys took over really quick with one fell swoop. You got us in underpants that looked like girls' panties. And once that happened, we didn't have these trousers that we were very loose in and free in, and our testes were able to do what they always did throughout history. They started to realize infertility became a big problem, because if you stick testes up into a man's body and they get hot, guess what it kills? Sperm. So it's not only a female problem. Respiratory disease rose 160%. We're looking, where's there mold on the wall? How about the carpet? How about, oh my God, how about the shirt I'm wearing? How about the polyester bra that I have? Sticking my breast up so men are going to be happy I have perky breast. Not turkey breast, maybe turkey perky breast, I don't know. So it's insanity, I can tell you, women did not invent bras that do that. It had to be some masochist as a man that did that. This is in European and North American preschoolers. Contact dermatitis and other skin ailments have become widespread. 1 in 2 males and 1 in 3 females will develop cancer. Now, we're not saying this is the only cause of cancer, but we are saying this is definitely a major player, or Brian Clement and Anna Maria Clement do not write about these things. And do we write about this the first day we think it? No, we spend decades thinking about it, observing it, reading research on it, accumulating what's real, and then presenting it to the public. So we don't have an idea or a philosophy. We're now telling you factual information, and it's up to you what you decide to do with truth. You can either say, like I was in Brentwood, California a month ago, speaking to all the Hollywood types, and they just couldn't get over when I got onto this subject. And one really confused pretty girl in the back of the room stood up and said, you mean to tell me I've got to get rid of my whole wardrobe? I said, baby, the way you look, I wish you did. I didn't say that. I was thinking that. And I said, you mean to tell me your wardrobe is more important than what I've just talked about for the last 20 minutes? That the way you look and the money you spent on your wardrobe is more interesting to you than cancer and brain disorders and neurological concerns? I said, well, maybe you shouldn't get rid of that, because it will have one less person who's self-involved on the planet if you continue to wear those clothes the way you are. And that's my sentiment. If people aren't willing to make changes, why should you be here? Nature is loving, but the fact is, it's real. It will let you do exactly what you want to do. It's all about human what again? Perception. Women now have a 1 in 8 chance of developing breast cancer. Interesting. So what really provoked Anna Marie and I to start thinking about this seriously decades ago is we noticed that women that had polyester bras on had significantly larger numbers of breast cancer concerns than women that didn't wear polyester bras. The granola girls from my generation, the braless girls, or the hippies who basically wore the rare cotton under bra. We found out then that there was a 6-time greater chance for you to contract breast cancer if you wore man-made fiber bras. I will repeat this because I know you don't want to hear it, because in this room I promise you today at a health conference that you're supposed to be listening to truth, I would imagine that 85 to 95% of you have man-made fiber bras on, because it's almost a life's work to find a cotton bra now. It's almost a life's work to do it. You don't get on the internet if you don't know the... Now, we're going to make you all pull your shirts up in a minute, by the way. You didn't know that before you signed up, did you? Wait till we get the guys to pull their trouser down. See if they're wearing those sissy girl stuff. We can do that for you girls, because if they're wearing that stuff, don't marry them. They won't have babies. But if you happen to be a big bosom woman, you basically have an 8 to 9 times greater chance of contracting breast cancer with the synthetic bra that also has something called a what in it? Underwire. Now, Anna Maria last night, if you were listening astutely, said to you, we just had a very healthy yoga instructor who, by the way, ate a vegan diet, come to us with cancer. And how she came to us, she picked up this book and she read Killer Clothes and said, oh my God, not one doctor, I've been to 4 holistic doctors, ever mentioned clothes to me once. And she came, not the doctor, came to the realization why I now have breast cancer is because where that underwire was, me doing yoga 6 days a week, leading people as a health expert, being a vegan, is really how I got the cancer. Could you imagine how perplexed this young lady was, who for year after year was doing the right thing, but it was underwiring and synthetic fiber clothing that literally was the clincher. That's what caused the breast cancer in her case. Once again, polyester, nylon, 6 times greater, big bosom, polyester, nylon, underwire, 8, 9 times greater chance. Don't listen to anything else Anna Marie and I tell you this weekend. Go home, take your bras off, burn them. But again, you've got to get the same mask on that I had to with my formaldehyde shirts, because you may get cancer from the fumes. Most people don't realize that our skin is our body's most important elimination organ. Now, when you think about elimination, you think about the front and the back. Number 1, every day we eliminate about 2 pounds of waste through our skin. You do not eliminate 2 pounds of waste if you're a good pooper from your behind. 2 pounds of waste from your skin every day. This is why it's so incredibly important to do things like saunas, dry brushing, showers, baths. I cannot emphasize the importance of this enough. And it's not just for hygiene, it's for health. I would say health here, hygiene here. If you hold back any percentage of these toxins from being released, they are accumulated in body fat and body organs to become like a time bomb primed to detonate as some future malady. So the more toxins you hold in. Now remember, most of the time we've been on this earth, we were nude, always in moderate climates because we were following the food chain. Our bodies perspired. We all exercised. Today, by the way, the statistic stands that's now stood for 3 decades, that less than 5% of the American population exercise enough. Now, if you got up early in the morning, as I do, or stayed up, I guess, late at night and watched television, you would think everyone in America exercised 24 hours a day. Now, why I watch those commercials, they have some pretty hot bodies on there. But the reality is, they're exercising, in this piece of equipment. Now, I used to buy equipment like that and bring it to Hippocrates. Then I realized, wait a minute, let them buy it. We'll go to the yard sale in 2 months, and we'll buy it from them, because they don't use it anyway. So somehow in America we think through osmosis, if I have a card for the local health club, that's enough. Or I have an exercise equipment that I drape my clothing on top of, that's enough. But remember, it wasn't an option. Everyone exercised 100 years ago and before. And everyone sweat. And nobody was eating anything but organic food, because there was no other option. You didn't have a choice at that point. Hey, could you give me the stuff with the chemicals on it? Matter of fact, if you said to my great-grandfather, give me the stuff with the chemicals on it, he would have punched you in the mouth. What are you talking about? You would have put chemicals on my food. Today, we said, oh, well, the University of Schmuckdom and Dr. Schnahucky, they did the research, and it's okay because Dr. Schmahucky says pesticides aren't going to really hurt you. Now, who do you think funded that study? Who do you think told you that wine is healthy for you? The alcohol industry. Who do you think tells you coffee drinking makes you smarter? That's a sure sign of stupidity if you believe that. Who do you think that tells you meat is good for you and you can't live without it? Look behind all of this stuff. Again, everything today, pretty much other than a handful of morsels, is called checkbook science. And all the so-called authorities, even the holistic authorities, most of them are schmahutzes, are going to go right down the party line, like now everyone's on the fish oil thing. Fish oil thing. And as soon as I write this and it starts to slowly leak out, whatever we say 5 years from now, they're all going to be on that line. Oh yes, well now we realize that although your arm fell off, fish oil wasn't that good. They'll come up with some other product, It's always a product. You ever notice that? It's always something you can buy. Rather than saying, by the way, it's not what you buy first. The buying stuff is that much. It's what you do first. The do first is really what it's about. Did you know that medical evidence shows that the longer a woman wears a bra, the greater her chance of developing breast problems, including the risk of breast cancer? Now, you know how many people we interviewed? We were stunned. How many women wear bras 24 hours a day? That's like insane. But we were shocked that 30% of the women we interviewed never took their bras off. You know why? They didn't have intimate, good, honest relationships with their husbands. So they felt so insecure in their own life, they wanted to look perky in the middle of the night if their husband happened to get up to take a leak. Now, can you imagine that? So they wore bras all of the time. And young ladies don't breastfeed, and the number one reason they give us for not breastfeeding is the fact that they didn't want their breasts to look old and saggy. Now, where's the disconnect with that? When you have a baby literally is in your body. It comes out after 9 months. You go through that remarkable, godly, spiritual process. And then you say, gee, I'm not going to breastfeed because I'm worried about how my breasts look. Where's this whole thing about the child and breastfeeding? I don't know. I just don't get it. Synthetic fibers pose such a fire and burn hazard that the U.S. Marine Corps prohibited its troops in Iraq from wearing synthetic clothing while off base. Do you know why? There were 3 times where it was so hot in the summer there that their synthetic clothing went on fire and they got very severe burns. You could almost do that here in some of the August. It's going to get worse and worse, as you see, as everything starts to heat up more. By the way, up until now, the hottest year in history for the autumn and early winter is this year. Last year was the record before that. How many of you know that? Somebody that's older like me, this time of the year here, it would have been major snowstorms and below zero. When I was a kid growing up, that was it. January, that was it. There was no other option. Medical studies have found that synthetic fibers help to induce muscle fatigue and muscle motor disorder, especially bad news for competitive athletes. So now the new clothes are nano clothes. They actually put silver in clothes so you don't have to wash them and smell. That's the new generation. In my book, Killer Clothes, I write about these things. You would almost think I'm making it up. You know what's really weird for me when I do this research? Sometimes I even feel awkward writing down the truth. That's how bizarre it is today. It's so incredibly... I say, who sits in a room and figures this nonsense out? Who can possibly validate a legitimate reason for putting this onto the market? And what's up with these people? You almost would think that they are intentionally doing this. Well, I'm not sure with clothing. I just think greed is the number one problem. That people who are unconscious and have one objective, to gain more stuff. When you don't have you want more stuff. Remember that. When you have you don't need the stuff. Know you, let's fill me up with stuff. That's really what's happening. It's not as evil and sinister as you think it is. It is in some ways. But I think a lot of this is just greed that we see. Studies have determined that synthetic fibers induce electrostatic discharge, and as a result, the wearing of tight synthetic clothing and undergarments is a contributor to infertility in men. Now, how many of you wear microfiber underwear at this point? Now the new trend is, when they first put panties on guys, they were all cotton panties. Now, 78% of them happen to be synthetic panties that they put on you. So if you heat it yourself up with cotton, can you imagine what a great job you'll do with plastic? How many of you have ever wrapped plastic around your hand and sat it there for 5 minutes and watched what happened to it? Do you think there's much of a difference with polyester undergarments? Or these tight yoga? So you all look like pretty boys and girls when you're at the yoga class, so you look sexy to everyone else? You have a sexy dying body going on there. Our freedom to choose and wear natural clothing has narrowed over the time as the lower cost of synthetic crowded natural fibers off the marketplace. Because it's a lot cheaper to mine oil and blow clothes out with that one than it is to go out and hand-pick cottons at this point. And so that's why you see more and more of this pushed. And other than a handful of the great designers today that have a token amount of organic wear for the highly conscious and well-off, you don't see anything but synthetic fibers being used. I won't name any names, but America's #1 best known of all designers, I challenged her to co-author this book with us. Obviously, you don't see her name on this, do you? Because she claims she's conscious, just like a lot of you claim you're environmentalists and eat chicken and fish. Okay. It's time that we start to tell the truth. Guess what? I found something out. You'll be able to gain all the money you need to by telling the truth. You don't have to lie, you don't have to cheat, you don't have to steal. It's not as easy to tell the truth, and you're not as well liked, but the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, you're going to be prosperous in your heart, soul, and spirituality as well as your pocketbook. You don't have to lie. The United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization declared 2009 to be the International Year of Natural Fiber. They're so concerned about it, the public isn't, because you don't know about what I'm teaching you. The United Nations had to step in, like they did with cell phones last year, when only 3 governments in the world, Russia being one of them, Sweden being 2, and France being 3, told the truth about cell phones causing brain cancer, because no other government, including your government, had the guts and balls to do that. So what they did is they stepped in. Well, they had to step in on clothing because they know what I'm teaching you here now. They know the disease rate is going up worldwide. They know that we are abusing slave labor people in these countries around the world so you can be adorned in garments looking good at your yoga classes. The need to revive and promote the sustainability of natural fiber clothing industry worldwide came about because, as the United Nations group declared on its website, the natural fiber industry has lost a lot of its market share due to the increased use of synthetic fibers. And when we take away the natural fibers that used to be picked by very poor villagers in faraway lands around the world, we put it in the hands of the petrochemical industry. The same guys that gives you the Valdez and the Gulf dump are going to profit more because you choose to buy inexpensive, cheap clothes at your local store or very expensive junk clothes at your designer's store. Consciousness means consciousness. You can't just say, I eat right, that's conscious enough. I exercise, I om and pray, that's enough. No, none of this is enough in and of itself. Every act is a spiritual act. Every act is a biological. Every act is an emotional act. And you cannot dissect, separate any of that. When you're taking a poop, it's a spiritual act. And I don't say that as a joke, because everything is omnipresent consciousness at all times. There's nothing but availability for maximum understanding or less. Humanity aspires to and acquires maximum understanding. Subhumanity, the masses, choose not to go for maximum and like to be in status quo. It's much easier to go along with a group than to say, hey, look it, I'm going to go one step further. It doesn't take a lot to do this, by the way. We retain the power to minimize risk to our health by taking simple precautions and practicing mindfulness about the clothing choices and buying options that we still have today. If it were the dream and hopes of the chemical industry, we wouldn't have natural fiber clothes anymore. Can bras trigger breast cancer? What if everything you thought you knew about bras and breast cancer turned out to be wrong? We just talked about that. This is a big section, so we'll run through that one quickly. More correlation accumulation. Medical anthropologist Singer saw that when his wife removed her bra, both of her breasts were outlined by dark red lines. Now, I bring this slide up because I want you women tonight to look and see. Because Yeah, you get what I'm saying. There's not one of you here that doesn't know what I'm telling you is real. You get it. But to make it even more real than what I'm saying to you, to get it out of the cerebral and put it into the heart, I want you to look at your bodies. You're going to be stunned. More than 60% of the women we asked to do that said they had indentations on their bodies, and not all of them were big bosom, but the majority were. The larger amount of indentation and cutoff to the lymphatic glands you have, because you have bigger breast, and again, you have an unnatural state of affairs when you're trying to prop them up and make them do something that they don't normally and naturally do. Your breasts aren't supposed to be up here all of the time. They're supposed to be hanging down. And by the way, the lymphatic system needs to operate, the major filter system of the body, by them swinging back and forth and moving, and by the testes doing the same exact thing. And if you don't do that, why wouldn't it make sense to you that the filters get clogged, and when they get clogged, the next inevitable step is you're going to end up with a problem. And the biggest problem starts with a C. The observation came in the wake of his wife's discovery in 1991 that she had a suspicious lump on her breast. So guess what? That's how that all happens. Let's look at this. More correlation. Striking differences emerged in the answers from two groups. 1% of the cancer group wore the bras for less than 12 hours a day. 20% of the non-cancer group wore bras less than 12 hours a day. Even thinking about being a male, I've never obviously wore a bra, not even at a Halloween party. But the reality is, I couldn't imagine sticking something on my upper body that constrained me 12 hours a day. To me, this is total insanity. 18% of the cancer group wore bras to bed. 3% of the non-cancer group wore bras to bed. Now think about that. More correlation accumulated. 1% of the group wore their bras for less than 12 hours. 20%, no, let's keep going. 14% non-cancer group had breastfed their children. Another big correlation. Women who, by the way, breastfeed their children have substantially and significantly less breast cancer than women who do not. Now, how many of you realize that most of the women that stay overweight after they've had a child is because they have not breastfed? How many of you know that? When you suckle, when the baby suckles the breast, it activates hormones that break down the fat that the body accumulates to hold up the belly when you have a baby. If, by the way, you do not, for the 1.5 to 2 years, prerequisite time to make the baby healthy, immunologically, psychologically, etc., breastfeed, having that suckling, you're going to have a whole time big problem your whole life keeping that fat and weight off you. Isn't that amazing how nature takes care of everything? Again, when we use our improper, incorrect perception, we sabotage even something like that. I mean, I see these little skinny women, they have their first baby, and well over half of them now in our culture never get little skinny again. They all have butts, and they're walking around, and some of these poor women who obviously are eating horribly bad diets and not exercising at all, you start to see the abnormality that creates a much higher incidence of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, etc., just because they choose not to do what's natural by breastfeeding a child. Okay, let's keep going on this. But this goes on and on and on. This is one of several studies that literally show you the correlation between bras, breast cancer, etc., etc. There's medical. When you read this book, you're going to be stunned that this is the first time you heard about it. What are the breast toxins? Breast cancer specialists in general agreement about 85% of the 200,000 women in the U.S. who are diagnosed with breast cancer each year have an inherent genetic predisposition that might have predicted based on their family history, which means that unhealthy lifestyle choices and the absorption of environmental pollutants account for the vast majority of the cases. Now, where you see medical doctors who have been unfortunately misled by the allopathic leaders, the pharmaceutical heads and the medical schools, to tell people that genetics play the major role in cancers, they are utterly wrong. And Dr. Yu, a colleague and very close friend, an oncological surgeon, very advanced, very smart guy, knows as much about both fields, as good in allopathic as he is in natural medicine. And, there's nothing that you can't talk to him about that he speaks about very well, articulately, intelligently, because he's done his work. And he said to me, this is really what frustrates both of us, Doctor, you and I, that last year in the United States we had 8,500 women submit themselves to having their breast removed without cancer. And the BRCA gene is what they come up with. And he said, have you had as much as I've had? I said, yeah. He said, let's talk to the top geneticist. I said, you know him? He said, yeah. Let's call the guy that has created the genetic code. And just ask him the question that frustrates you. He said, he doesn't have much time. You have 2 minutes on the phone with him. I said to him, listen, do you think genetics has anything at all to do with cancer or other diseases? He said 5%. He said only 5% of disease comes from genetic heritage. 95% comes from lifestyle choices, environments, etc. So when you hear a doctor say to you, does your mother have it, does your grandmother have it, the reason you may have it is because you lived exactly the same way your mother and grandmother did. Not because it's genetics that cause that. And Hippocrates is the best example in the planet's history of why genetics are not real. If everything was genetics and you were predisposed to this, why do people come with stage 4 diseases and reverse them? If it was genetic, I couldn't do that. If I had cancer, I couldn't take it and change my genes. So see how you're being misled. And the poor doctors are being misled. So I have intelligent conversations with some of these MDs, and they really believe that. And I say, well, why don't you read the geneticist? They're the ones who understand genetics. You don't. You never studied genetics at school. Even if you study it well, you're not a geneticist. So these are the kind of crazy things that you, the public, has to deal with today. Misinformation. Bad information all the time. Let's keep going on this. We'll open for questions very soon on this. This part of the book I wrote mostly. Anna Maria didn't. Did you get that joke? Lymph system evidence for theory. There are 3 primary steps or stages in the theory. Toxins that can cause cancer, such as the ones in consumed products, are absorbed by the body. They then accumulate in fat tissue because fat tissue attracts toxins like a magnet. A woman's breast tissue is mostly composed of fat cells, so toxins tend to be stored there. So the more weight you have on your body, now some people are literally skinny and have a lot of fat in their body. Where you have a lot of big people that have very little body fat, but they look big. So it's not all I'm skinny and don't have body fat. Anyone that has exceptional fat that's not built into muscle, weight that's not muscle, that's the real weight that you want, literally have a greater and higher propensity to get every disease known to man. Because where chemicals and heavy metals hang out is in fat in the body. So by giving up animal foods, not only do you save your health, your life, the planet, but you're also saving the possibility that you will not get a disease. So this, why, if I know this, and you know what I'm telling you is real, isn't this pervasive in the field of healthcare today? There's not a doctor or a scientist or a researcher that I would ever suggest to them that fat is where heavy metals and chemicals are residing that wouldn't agree with that. Then again, just like when the EPA said that fluoride causes cancer, the next day they should have said, let's eliminate it. Well, if they know, by the way, that fats and animal fats are where you get that from, hold the disease-causing elements, why wouldn't the next day the step be that let's get rid of the fat? Let's get rid of the disease-causing elements in the body. Body's lymph system plays a role, along with the liver, in removing toxins. If the lymph system fails to play its designed role, effectively, toxins get stored in fat cells for too long, triggering the development of cancer cells. Now, the best way for me to describe this to you so you get a very vivid picture is that if you look at you, if I took your head and put a plastic bag over it, what would you look like in about 5 minutes? Just picture what that may look like. Your eyes would be bulging. You wouldn't be breathing anymore. You'd be gray. You'd be laying on the ground. What happens if I put animal fat around the head of your cell? You think it may be gray? You think it may be laying on the ground and not mobile? You think the electromagnetic frequency would be drained out of it? And do you think when you beat up a cell that much and it's almost dead, it wouldn't be easy to seduce into becoming what? A cancer cell. You beat anyone up enough, they're going to go along with anything. You see these poor kids? that were accused, the 5 young kids that were accused back in the 80s of raping that girl in Central Park. And I just saw an interview recently with them, a brilliant interview. And they said, why didn't you just agree? They said, we couldn't take anymore. The police were just beating on us so much that we just said it would be better to leave this room and admit we did something we didn't do than to sit here under the gruesome conditions we have today. So that's literally the same thing that you would do if I beat you up enough, you'd succumb, even if it wasn't true, is how you get diseases like cancer. The cell just can't tolerate anymore. Enough already. How much badness do you have to give the cell before you expect it to fight back with you? Because your body's lymph system is reliant on passive forms of fluid propulsion like movement and exercise, unlike your heart, which drives blood through your vessels, the lymph system is sensitive to outside physical pressure. Since there are lymph pathways and lymph nodes in your armpits, under your breast and between your breast, a tight-fitting bra can squeeze those areas and prevent proper drainage of lymph fluid that might ordinarily carry away toxins stored in fat. Now, again, I just told you 18 minutes ago that less than 5% of you exercise adequately. What does that mean? This is the first of many times you may hear me say it. We know because of people who have spent their entire life in the science of exercise. The most notable worldwide is down in Texas, called Dr. Kenneth Cooper. Dr. Kenneth Cooper has established without any question, without any challenge, that just to maintain health, not to be healthy, to maintain health, you have to be doing at least 35 minutes of aerobic exercise 5 days a week. This is not an option, by the way. You will get more than 3 times the benefit if you're willing to do an extra 35 minutes and go to an hour. We also know that it takes 28 minutes of vigorous aerobic exercise to get to the point where you're getting full body benefit. 28 minutes to get full circulation where from your feet to your head, blood is moving through, oxygen is coming up. And so if you go from 28 to 35, great, 7 minutes, but how about 28 to 60 minutes? Now you have that blood flow going. And remember what I said about depression and exercise, moderate to light depression. It will remove, I promise you, I'll bet money with you, on 50% of the people if we can consistently get you to do aerobic exercise. Okay. Weightlifting, you must do at least an hour and a half, 3 days a week. That's sissy stuff. You should be doing 2.5 to 3.5 hours. But if you're not doing at least an hour and a half, you will not be healthy. And by the way, 82% of muscle comes from fat. So we want to get rid of the fat that holds the chemicals and the heavy metals that cause disease. The number one best way to do it is not change your diet, it's to lift weights. You will not look healthy and sexy without weightlifting. Every model, every actor, every actress that you admire their bodies, they weightlift. Period. You do not look like that unless you lift weight. Everybody in the world lifted weight until about 5 generations ago. Again, it was called farming. Nobody had an option. We're not going to go out to the local, lifestyle gym or LA Fitness or Bally's Fitness. We're going to go out and plow the field. We're going to carry the children. We're going to pick the crop. Everyone weightlifted. You go to the only places in the world where people are thin now are in places where people are eating plant-based diets and doing vigorous exercise. When I was in Cairo, Egypt, working years ago, I was stunned because at 4 and 5 in the morning, I'd hear a commotion down on the street below my hotel room, and I'd see these skinny little men lifting up bales. So after several weeks of this, I happened to be walking back with all big Western guys, well, big my size and a little bit bigger, and we took one of these bales and 4 of us tried to lift it, and it was almost impossible for 4 of us to try to lift it. And I looked over, and here's a little skinny man that must have been 75 years old, lifting these on his back from 4 or 5 in the morning till 6 and 7 at night when we were coming back to the hotel. And this is what he did 6 days a week. And I thought to myself, I think I'm strong. I think I'm healthy. A few years ago, I happened to be up speaking, and I asked somebody if they would let me use their old horse plow. And as they walked me over, they kept saying, well, I'm not sure you should do this. Very polite man, much older than me. And I said, well, I work out at the gym, and I do all of this stuff. He said, I'm not sure you should do this. So they finally got all the leather straps around me and stuck the things on my shoulder. And before you know it, I'm being dragged by these horses on my knees practically down. I said, ho, 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 stop, stop. And I'm thinking to myself, do you realize that I go way out of my way to be strong and healthy, and I'm a wimp compared to what the average person would have been 100 years ago? And I went over to the guy that lent me the plow, and I said, how long have you... He said, oh, I was out here at 7 today. He said, I did stop for an hour and a half to eat lunch with my family. He said, I'll be here until sundown tonight. 12 hours that day, he was taking the plow and going up and down in lines. And in a minute and a half, I screamed and said, stop doing it. Now think about this. Think about this. Now how about those of you that don't exercise at all? You would have put the wood over your shoulders and collapsed into the mud. You wouldn't even have got a minute and a half. Think about that. Craziness. The lymph system is so important. We can go through this in great detail. Very, very important, because the lymph system's throughout the body, and most of your disorders come from a clogged lymph system, not only breast cancer, a wide variety. What purpose do bras have? Let's keep going. You know what, they're for men, not for women. But women have been conned into thinking about them. How many of you realize that nobody wore bras 100 years ago and before? That's a fairly new invention. Sort of like around the same time, a little bit before, was there. Now, we've never been known as a high-energy kind of guy. 58-year-old cleaner Frank Lewin certainly made the sparks fly one day in September 2005 when his job hunting in Warrpool Town in Western Australia, wearing several items of synthetic clothing, including a zip-up line jacket. He walked into a lobby of a local business, and loud explosion sound erupted like a large firecracker when he walked onto the carpet. Burn marks began to appear on the carpet where his footsteps had signed in. Now, can you think of this? Here a guy goes to his local store, buys garments. It's the middle of very hot summer. They get 40 degrees, Celsius there. And his body explodes because he gets synthetic carpet that has electromagnetic static in it, connecting with the electromagnetic static, and it explodes just like the guys in Iraq did. Now, before I started to talk about any of this, let's be very candid. How many of you ever once pondered and considered clothing being one of the contributors to major disease? Raise your hand. So 2 or 3 people, 4 people here. And so that means in a room like this with 150, 200 people, that the vast, overwhelming majority of you never once considered this. Isn't that something when you think about it? It really is something. And not to say that we're stupid, we're just misled. I didn't think about this until I started this work. Never once did I ponder this or think about it. And I started to look at these people and say, my God, here this yoga girl we talked about. She'd been a vegan. She was healthy. She did more exercise than I told you to do. The high end of the exercise. And here she ended up with cancer. So let's now have some questions. So stand up here. We'll answer questions on this specific subject.
Hi, my name is Jerry Layton, and I actually had a question about fire retardants and flame retardants, not in clothing, but in bedding and mattresses that have been soaked now in boron for a number of years because of, I guess, a handful of people that fell asleep smoking cigarettes.
Well,
can you speak to that?
One of the inventive ways, many inventive ways that the oil industry makes money is they mandate it, just like they did with supplementation with the pharmaceuticals, international laws that make it sound like it's protecting you so that governments force companies to buy their products. So these are petrochemical products. 8 out of 10, as Anna Maria showed you last night, that's why I didn't elaborate on this, 8 out of 10 infant products, high chairs, car seats, clothing, 8 out of 10 have fire retardant on it. A known, very well-established cancer causer. Bedding, that is not organic bedding, that is not eco-bedding. You can suspect and expect that your bedding has fire retardants on it. And so, can you imagine laying somewhere, hopefully at least 8 hours a night, that you have these fumes coming out of this bedding? Even those of you that have the new so-called fitting textured bedding, used to call it Swedish bedding, that stuff is deadly bad, putting out chemicals the whole time you're there. This stuff is obviously going to cause disease. And even if you don't end up with cancer, which is one of the likely ones to get, you probably are going to have brain fog, neuron dysfunction, and degradation of brain cells.
Why do you suppose it is then that the available organic products are multiple times more expensive than
it's about quantity. It's supply and demand. And you know, some of it is embellishment of cost, but a lot of it is if a small company makes 300 mattresses a year versus one of the large companies that make 3 million mattresses a year, bottom line, it's its cost factor. Just like, why are we paying a whole lot more for organic food than we are ones that they put more on, they put spray on? It's almost, you know, a misnomer that would happen. But it's the same answer, just not as many. If the critical mass can demand it, organic bedding, that's it. We are moved over to all organic sheeting at Hippocrates now. Slowly but surely, our newer buildings all have organic bedding in it. And within the next 2 years, everything will have organic bedding in it. But we went out of our way to get non-fire retardant. And you know how hard that was as years went on? We had to find experts. You know, we'd go to the average guy, they'd say, oh, no, it's not in there. Then we'd call the company, and it would be in there.
Right.
So we had to find experts with integrity and make them realize, you're going to make a lot of money if you tell us the truth. First time you don't tell us the truth, we're going to cut you off. And so they now tell us the truth, and so in the cast we've been buying. Now we're going to the organic, but again, it costs me 4 or 5 times more money.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Flo. The question I have is, since we're trying to be environmental friendly and we're staying away from synthetics, especially having a daughter who's a New York director for an animal rights organization, and she really needs to learn a lot about this, but the last thing that, you know, of course, since she's my daughter, she educates me on that. So now it's like you can't use synthetic, so what are you going to use instead of leather products or wool or natural? Like if you are...
Yeah, I mean, the real, and I'm not as pure a vegan as some are.
Right.
Real vegan purist, not environmentalists, but animal rights people will not wear silk.
So they're sacrificing their health, basically, for the animals. That's what it sounds like.
They are. They won't wear wool. You know, I wrote an article, I wrote a magazine on this. By the way, you can get on the Hippocrates website and access 30 years of magazines we've written. First they were newsletters and then magazines. And I learned a lot. Sometimes I have opinions that I'm wrong on. And basically, I had the top guy on animal rights from Australia write me, New Zealand, here in the United States, up in New York State, and they said, what are you telling people to wear wool for? Now, I wear wool. This is a wool suit. So I've compromised that. But on the other hand, real advocates, animal rights activists will not wear wool. I didn't realize, by the way, they kill a lot of the sheep after they extract the wool for meat. How many of you knew that? Now, they don't have to, but they found economically it was better for them to do that somehow. Silk, the little worms, they harm the worms. But these are the same people that won't take bee pollen.
Right.
They'll only take flower pollen. And I have a lot of respect for them. And I can say nothing but I honor that and respect that. So the fact is, you just have to buy the natural fiber clothing like the organic clothing that have the least environmental impact. And you've got to do this. You can't wear synthetic clothing and sacrifice the environment. If you're saying you're an animal rights expert, obviously you're sympathetic with environmental issues and health issues at that point. And
right, so it gets a little tricky, you know, it's like it's
it gets really clear. And so you've got to see where your bullshit line is. All of us have a bullshit line. You know, so we'll go so far and then boom, we won't go any further.
Okay, another thing, I know you don't advocate, obviously we're talking about a vegan raw diet, but if someone were to use, like, because I've always used aluminum foil or what would you say would be a good substitute for that if you were like heating something up?
You can buy very pure stainless steel trays rather than aluminum foil that you could put cooking and baking in. But they have to be number 10 stainless steel. What that means is it has less amalgam. What amalgams mean, stainless steel is not a real steel. They don't mine that out of the ground. They mix different things together. And the cheaper it is, the more nickel that's in it. Okay. And as Anna Maria pointed out last night to you, nickel is definitely indicative of rashes. And a lot of times when they get on the program and they get rid of their eczema and they get rid of their psoriasis, and these people don't get well, bingo, now we sound like geniuses because it's almost always nickel poisoning when we test it. So that's it.
You were talking about the importance of weightlifting and being healthy. And I know that weightlifting is great for building lean muscle and it stokes your metabolism, burns calories and fat. But it's also my understanding that weightlifting is very hard on the joints. And I'm wondering if years of weightlifting can cause problems in that area.
I would have been the best example of how not to lift weight for the first decade. I went in and swung the weights around, and thank God I was young and I had elasticity, so I didn't injure myself. But you see guys doing that get older, or women doing that, and it's going to create a major problem for them. Properly conducted weightlifting will not put pressure on your joints, but in the contrary, help you to build cartilage, create further elasticity, but it has to be properly done. How I, thank God, changed is an 82-year-old man that just couldn't endure another day of watching me almost kill myself, came over and said, "Let me train you, young man. I just can't take it. I hold my breath every time you're in the gym." And he said, "You notice you don't have muscles." And so what he did is he brought me over, and this is the safest thing to do in a gym, to the bars. And of course, I couldn't lift my body weight up one time on a bar. So he would hold my feet and lift me up, and I'd pull up. And I did 1 and 2, and then 10, and then 3 times 10, and then 4 times 10. And before you know it, psychologically, I thought he was holding my feet. My friends finally said to him, "He wasn't holding your feet. He was putting his finger at the bottom. You were doing it yourself." So the safest, best way, most rapid way to build muscle mass in the body without injury, because your body inherently through history, through evolution, has developed a safe way to lift body weight this way, dips, and you'll build muscle rapidly, significantly faster than lifting free weights. Then free weights can be done, but you have to, by the way, I do both. You have to, by the way, lift them in particular ways. None of this swinging stuff. To look macho to the girls at the gym, don't take big weights and swing them to get them up. Take lighter weights and go very, very slow. This morning is an example. You look at anyone who has muscle, who knows what they're doing. It took me years to get that. You lift heavy weights 2 or 3 times, and then you take very light weights and move very slow. And guess when I have the bigger burn? Not when I'm lifting 50-pound weights this way, but when I'm lifting 15-pound weights like I did this morning here. And my muscles were fatigued by the end of doing 4 sets of 12 of those. So these are the tricks that you do, but you need a trainer. And today it's great because I don't know if Adelphi offers this, but many of the universities even have master-level programs in exercise physiology. So get a well-educated person, and boy, I would have saved a lot of pain and suffering by doing that. Part of what we give you at Hippocrates, we have a trainer there that literally trains you. You can get personal training too, but that's part of the program now. And we have a gym, a state-of-the-art gym there.
And one more quick question on that subject. You were talking about your diet earlier. You said you drink mostly juices and just eat 1 meal a day.
Correct.
Can you actually gain and build lean muscle eating that little?
You can, because you have a little extra weight on you. But if you're a little skinny person, no. If you're a little skinny person, you're going to have to do what I did at the beginning. I was like an idiot. I went from this big fat guy, got on a living food diet, became emaciated skinny, because I was eating a lot of fruit, not eating the right foods at that point, and literally then realized, oh my God, I can't be healthy without weightlifting. Now, it was a big challenge for me, because when I was a kid, I wasn't an athlete. I was an anti-jock. I used to think the jocks were sort of the dumb guys. And basically, I was a musician. The only thing I lifted was grass to my mouth. That was about it. Cigarettes over here and grass over here, And bottom line is, I finally concluded I've got to start to lift weight. Thought I was going to die for 3 months when I first started it, then realized I'd die without it after that. How many of you exercise on a regular basis here? You know what I mean. You don't do it, you feel bad. But it took a long psychological shift in my head. And it wasn't only 3 months, it went on for years doing that. With that said, skinny people are going to have to eat what I finally had to eat. Take sprouted grains, make them into palatable, delicious things, like in a dehydrator, cookies with stevia in it. Things that you're going to want to eat. It's going to taste like an oatmeal cookie. That's how you do it. You slow down your metabolism. Bean burgers, nuts and seed burgers, and you dehydrate a lot. We don't want this to be your life's work. As I said to you, the day you really are eating this way and not worrying about food is the day you're healthy. Because that means this is your food, now you have this life thing going on over here. And so bottom line is, at first you're going to be mono-focused on food. You have to be, because that's been your life so far. You understand? You're going to have to be completely nuts on food. It may take, as it did me, years. But after that, the objective is to get away from it. So make a lot of this food at once. So get a dehydrator. It's a rainy Sunday night as an example. And you say, okay, I'm going to take 20-gallon jars of, 10 of them will have sprouted grains like oatmeal in it as an example. And the other 10 are going to have maybe 5 of sprouted nuts and 5 of sprouted beans. Now, get your same wheatgrass juicer with a double auger, put it through. Now you have a big bowl of dough, or big bowl of nut dough, or big bowl of bean dough. Put your seasonings in it. Make enough for the next month or two in a dehydrator. So this is the fastest food I've ever eaten. You know, you just get the food and you eat the food. That's it. And the glory of food, the taste, you know, the facade you have made of food, that's the ritualistic thing, goes away. You're going to see this is really simple and really easy to maintain complete health. So good questions.
Hi, my question is, what do you think about the use of cannabis in terms of smoking or using it as an oil to heal cancer? And also the ritualistic ways that the shamans use ibogaine and ayahuasca and things like that, assuming they're organic. And my second question is, what do you think about all the stuff they're spraying?
When you say the stuff they spray?
Yeah, like the airplanes are spraying and like lining the skies with these
this.
Yeah.
I would like not to believe that. Unfortunately, when I saw the documentary, I had to buy into that one too. How many of you saw the documentary? Yeah. This is where they're seeding the entire planet with metallics. Yeah. Pardon?
Right.
Chemtrails. Yes, they call it chemtrails. Okay, so let's go through. What we have to do, at least what I believe we should do, I don't know what you should do, I believe we should do this, is look at the traditions from the past. And a lot of the use of medicinal herbs, etc., can actually be valid. The debate they're having now in this country on marijuana use, I think it's a silly debate. The vast majority of people that are involved with this just want to smoke grass legally. And they should say that. If we do have, which it does have medicinal benefits for glaucoma, for cancer pain in many cases, not every person, but many, for a variety of other neurological concerns, neuropathies, etc., why don't we make in a pill a form of THC that's out of it so we don't have to smoke it? Because what we do know, smoking marijuana will give you a higher incidence of lung cancer than smoking cigarettes. That we do know. So the reality is that's the kind of issue we're talking about. So many times people say, let's use rituals and things that people did in the past, but they're doing it for all the wrong reasons. If we're doing it for the right reason, trace it back and see that the things, the oils, etc., have benefits, good. But when somebody says to you, an oil is going to cure cancer, you know that that person is either way off or a charlatan to begin with. Because if you haven't gotten by now, and you certainly will by tomorrow night, that there's a variations on why somebody has any disease, you're never going to get it. I wish it was easy enough just to give you wheatgrass. I know how wheatgrass can kill disease, but wheatgrass alone is not going to make you well. It's one of the many, many tools that you use. If you had a negative attitude and you ate like me and exercised like me, you'd still be sick. And variation, I know people with incredibly positive attitudes, but they can't quite pull their act together with diet and exercise. And so there's combinations of these things. And then at the end of the day, when you get the emotional stability where you're happy about life and yourself, you know who you are, you know what your passion is, you know what your fulfillment goals are, then basically to surrender that to the spiritual life is ultimately where we all have to be. You know, your relevance doesn't have to do with you as much as it has to do with the universal understanding of consciousness, God if you want it, at that point. And so why we would do all of this is to give ourselves to be part of that usable, functional, contributory energy that's called maximum life, that creates the fibrin of the universe. And so it's bigger than we are, but at the same point, it starts with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. 2 more questions?
Brian, you said that you really couldn't tell us where to find the organic cotton, organic clothes. Are there any websites that you would suggest?
Well, you know, I'm bad at that. If you look at the back of the book, we've listed many of them that we found to be viable websites, but they're ever increasing. Like recently out in San Diego, I met a young lady who I'm really happy about because she's in her 20s, and so she finally made sexy-looking organic bras. My generation, we're granola people. We don't care what the bra looks like. You know, take the bra off. That's what I'm interested in. You know? But with the young ladies, when you give a young lady a granola bra, she's not going to wear that. She'd rather have a Victoria's Secret bra. Remember, she's out there still trying to find a mate. So there are those viable tools. And so you really have got to search the internet with Google, That's going to be a big help, and I'm really bad. Anna Marie would be better one to answer that. I get into the science stuff, and not that she doesn't, but on the other hand, she's practical enough to say, well, that's great, but how are they going to get any of this?
I also have one more question. I'm not sure if you're going to want to answer it now, but the epidemic of bed bugs in New York and other places, and the kind of sprays and things that they do to get rid of it. It's really scary.
You may not die from the bug. You may die from something else.
Yeah.
What's great about it is they have viable UV lights that you can buy cheaply, for like $20, that you can actually swing over. It's UV lights that create oxygen. Swing over your bed, swing over your pillow once a week, whatever it may be. Carry with you. Not a big thing. It's about this big. Again, don't ask me where to get it. I've seen these, we've used them, etc. You basically get those and carry them with you and use them at your house. It will kill them. It will literally kill them. Where I actually saw the science on it, there was 100% unanimous kill-off if this is used properly on a bed. And it's just like a wand. And it's the same thing we put in pools. They're actually UV lights that when you put a fluid over the top of them, they spark into oxygen. And this is self-contained. And they spark into oxygen. When you put enough oxygen, it kills these things, almost on the spot. You don't have to sit there for an hour in each spot. It's a wand that you move very slowly and up and down, and they show you the directions how to do this.
It sounds excellent, but I didn't get the name exactly.
That one is called the magic wand. Now, where to get it, God knows, but maybe you Google that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I just wanted to thank you so much for the information about the bra, because I lived in Hawaii for 11 years, and we didn't wear bras in Hawaii, and I haven't been able to wear a bra here either. And I'm always ashamed in New York because I'm under a tremendous amount of pressure from other women. Why aren't you wearing a bra? Why aren't you wearing a bra? Because they hurt me, because they're uncomfortable, because they're constricting my energy field and my body, and I hate them. So I wanted to say thank you about the bra.
I'm all for you. How many men here are happy for what you said?
I also wanted to say I have a question about the chemtrails, because it's clear to me, and I've seen videos about how they're trapping the heat by spraying these chemicals into our atmosphere, and that's part of what's causing the global warming.
Well, here's my take on chemtrails. I didn't want to hear another bad thing. But, I'm not that kind that can hold back on this. So I finally sat down with a physicist friend of mine who explained it in detail. And my conclusion is, and I'm an optimist on this, that it's not what's creating global warming. That global warming has become so incredibly bad and out of control, they're trying to prevent global warming with this.
Well, that is the mainstream line about why they're doing this. I mean, I think it's a deep rabbit hole, and that wasn't my question. The deeper you go, the more evil you find, especially with the chemtrails and the HARP, because they seem to be working together to create these hurricanes and other really mass things.
You know what she means by the HARP? I'll explain that to you.
Are you in your work with the Hippocrates Institute addressing the heavy metals that we're breathing in through this?
Oh, absolutely. Again, you're going to see everywhere we write, magazines we do, the project that Stephen Shore and I are working on, a major part of the real truth about health, and our website, it's growing. We are going to keep you absolutely up to speed on the latest cutting-edge research and science that scientifically supports the degradation of the planet. So you notice I don't just say eat sprouts, become happy. We're talking about a large venue of things that maybe some people have never even considered or thought about. So of course, we talk about heavy metals and chemicals. If you've noticed, we've, in this seminar ever since last night at 6 o'clock, spent 38 minutes on that subject between Anna Marie and I.
And so you're testing people's bloods for things like barium and strontium?
There's no test that's valid that we can't offer at Hippocrates. And so when we have a suspicion that that's it, but fecal testing is actually more important in most cases to find the microbial problems that people have.
And the hair. Thank you.
Hair, we talked about hair earlier. I'm not as big a fan of hair because years ago there were 7 companies that did hair. I took one woman's hair that was this long, cut it, sent it to 7 companies, and got 6 radically different views on that. So we rely heavier on the blood, not to say that in the 30 years since I did that, it hasn't greatly improved. But that was enough to burn me once, and that was it. So we'll go on and take a little bit of a rest, a break. We'll dance for a minute, and then we'll go to the next subject.